everyone, it's Laura, and today I'm here to talk to you about my December wrap-up. So I started the month with Half a Soul, and so this book was following Theodora, or Dora, and the book starts off when she's young, about 8 or 9, and a fairy steals half of her soul, and so she becomes quite an oddity in current society. Her emotions are somewhat dulled, and she basically has lost the hope of appearing normal or getting a husband, and the only person that is really close to her is her cousin Vanessa, and so she just hopes to help Vanessa find a suitable husband, someone that Vanessa can actually love, and that maybe Vanessa will have a place for her in her home. And so she goes to London with her cousin, hoping to find Vanessa a nice guy to marry. And there they run into the Lord Sorcier, Elias Wilder, and he is the court magician, and he discovers that Dora has only half a soul, and he offers to help her because he likes the challenge that it presents. And the two of them bicker and spar, and it's very witty and it's wonderful. And I just really liked the characters. I liked the story. I liked the fact that while there's romance in the story and it's satisfying, it's not the only thing going on with the plot, and it's just great. And for being only 239 pages, having so much in such a concise amount of pages and words, it's honestly shocking to me, and it was very satisfying, and I gave it a 4.5. Now, this version of the book also has the short story, The Lord Sorcier, that's only about 40 pages. And this is basically how Elias got the title of the Lord Sorcier, and when he's helping the country out in the war with the French. And so seeing kind of the backstory for him after I've already read the books, and him meeting Albert, who was an important side character in the rest of the book, it was really quite sweet, and it added dimension to his character. Next, I read The Christmas Tree Farm, which is the third book in the Dream Harbor series, where they're all companion novels. You have the same characters, but you don't necessarily have to read one to read the others. But this is the third, and this is about Kira North, who buys the abandoned Christmas tree farm just on the outskirts of town. And at first she has no desire initially to open it up as a Christmas tree farm, but then when she kind of realizes how run down the place is and that she will need an increase in funds, she decides to kind of get it back up. But for her own reasons and backstory that she has, she really wants to do it on her own and prove her independence and her capability, but she doesn't have all the necessary skills really that will help fix up her house and get her business back on track. And then in comes Bennett Ellis, who is the brother of Jeannie from the first book, The Pumpkin Spice Cafe, and he's here visiting his sister for an extended period of time during the holidays because he can work from home, so he has that flexibility, and he has his 3 dogs with him. So he lives in California. This is more of an East Coast, I want to say New England somewhere. They don't really specify exactly what state it's supposed to be in, and they butt heads for the first bit, but they're drawn to each other, and then they have to kind of decide what to do. They had decided to have a holiday fling, but then what happens when they catch feelings? And if you can't tell by how I'm talking about it, I wasn't a huge fan of this book, and I think it's just because of the way that it's written, where these people are adults, and I understand that you can lust after people, but just some of the lines that are uttered are kind of cringe-inducing to me. An example is that Kira's house, her heating isn't really working, and so she's very cold and all that. And one of the first things that Bennett notices is that she's cold, and that he thinks is that, like, I know how I can warm her up. And that is just so cringe-inducing to me, and sounds like something straight out of fanfic somewhere. I don't know. once they kind of got together and they were having their holiday fling, I was fully on board. But it felt so inauthentic the way that they got together. I don't know. It was not for me. The only one out of these series that I liked so far was Cinnamon Bun Bookstore. And I think that's legitimately because Hazel and Noah, in the story and the universe, they've known each other a few years at that point. So it feels more legitimate in my brain, at least. I don't know. So I gave this one initially a 3.5. I don't know, that might actually be too generous. I am getting rid of this. I'm not holding on to it. I have no interest in rereading it. I might eventually dock it down to 3 because it was just, I read it. Next was Foxglove, which is the second in a trilogy after Belladonna. And I was eager to continue reading this because I really was pleasantly surprised by Belladonna, and I wanted to continue on with the series before I forgot too many of the details. So this is following Signa Farrow, and in the first book, she has basically had a really rough life. She lost both her parents when she was an infant, and as such, she was basically carted from one relative to another who were supposed to be her guardians until she was old enough to claim her inheritance and property when she turns 20. But unfortunately, all her previous guardians after her first one was her grandmother, who was wonderful and she has fond memories, but her grandmother was quite old, and after her grandmother passed away, she was carted to all these other relatives, and unfortunately, a lot of them were either outright mean to her, they were just there for the paycheck of being her guardian, or they basically kind of ignored her very existence. And so it was just kind of awful in lots of different ways. So finally, at the start of the book, she is sent to the Hawthorns to be with them, and she only has to live with them for a few months because she's 19. I think it's something like 4 or 5 months and she'll turn 20, and she can finally take her place in society. And so she goes there, and I believe that the relative there is her aunt, and she married into the Hawthorne family. Unfortunately, when she arrives, her aunt has passed away just a few months ago from some unknown disease. And Signa has an unusual ability. She can see ghosts. So she goes there and she sees her aunt's ghost, and her aunt's ghost said that she was murdered. So Signa tries to help figure out what's going on, especially because her cousin Bly starts to come down with the same symptoms that her mother had before she passed away. So Signa really likes the Hawthorns and really wants to be part of the family and help them figure out what's going on. And Death is a character in the first book and is personified as a person, and they kind of end up having a romance between them. And so I can't really say what happens in this book without talking about what happened in the first book, but it basically starts immediately after the first book where something happens, and now Signa is old enough where Foxglove is her family's estate, and she does go and visit that at some point, and there are ghosts there as well, and it was a good follow-up. I didn't like it as much as I liked Belladonna, mainly because of the addition of someone trying to get in between Signa and Death and their relationship, and it just felt unnecessary and forced, and it was just frustrating to read. But I did like seeing how everything continued and how the characters got on, and it was interesting because at the end of this book, it did kind of seem the end of Signa's story. So there is a third book, Wisteria, and I'm curious how much Signa is going to take part in that, or what exactly is going to happen, if Signa is going to take a back seat. We shall see. So I gave this book a 4. Now we have Ariadne. This is the first book of the different kind of mythology books that I picked up at a used bookstore, and this is the first one I read, and I have very little knowledge of Greek myths other than what's in Percy Jackson. It's been a while since I've read those books, so even then my knowledge is kind of lacking. I watched a vlog of someone reading the first few Percy Jackson books and they mentioned Ariadne's threads, and I honestly did not even remember that she was mentioned in the Percy Jackson books. So take my knowledge from Percy Jackson with a grain of salt. So this is basically follows Ariadne through her life. She is the daughter of King Minos, and his wife Pasiphae, and he kind of upset Poseidon. So Poseidon kind of cursed Pasiphae for being in love and lustful with a horse. And so she gave birth to the Minotaur. And so Minos used that in the labyrinth and kind of got power by sending people into the labyrinth. And the rest of the family had to kind of live with the shame of having a mother or a relative that gave birth to the Minotaur and had relations with the horse. And after she gave birth to the Minotaur, Pasiphae was basically kind of never the same. And so Ariadne was close to her younger sister Phaedra, but they hated their father. He was a cruel man, and the best that they could hope for basically was to marry someone nice and get away from their home. And then comes Theseus, and Ariadne sees her chance. She helps him, and then it just kind of continues on through her life. And Phaedra, I guess, has her own tale in Greek mythology, so you get kind of an idea of what's going on there. You see Dionysus, you see a little bit more of Theseus, and it weaves a lot of different myths. I looked up stories after I completed this book kind of to see how true they were to some of the myths that were out there, and it seems to do a really good job of blending it all together to kind of seem very linear and cohesive in a story through Ariadne's eyes. So it was very well done, and I really liked how easy it was to consume. The only thing I didn't like is that I sadly forgot how just awful the Greek gods are, and how little they seem to care for humans, and how cruel they are and eager they are to punish women for the sins of the men in their life. And that was just a little depressing to read. So overall, I gave this a 4 as well. And we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. A lot of people have talked about this. I read it. I liked it a lot. It was my first V.E. Schwab. And I wasn't sure what to expect with this because I heard a lot of people talk about lyrical writing, and I thought it would be very verbose and wordy and flowery, and it didn't really seem that way to me. So I don't really know what people are talking about, but that could just be me. I thought it was very easy to read and very easy to understand. I did listen to the audiobook in tandem with this, and I enjoyed the audiobook. I liked the concept because Adeline, she is 1714, France, a small town. She was trying to escape a marriage that she didn't want with a widower. She was 23, so that was old in that time frame. You know, she was kind of forced into it. She makes a deal with some entity. They never really specify if it's death, if it's like a dark god. It's just some dark being that answers her plea for help and makes an awful deal with him. So she's very curious about life and the world and wants more time, wants to see more things, wants to experience more life. And so this entity grants her that ability, but unfortunately the consequence of the deal is that no one remembers her. No one that she's met, no one that she loved, no one that she grew up with, and anyone new that she meets forgets her as soon as she's out of sight. A door closes, they walk out of the room type thing. And so all of the hurdles that presents. She can't have a job, she can't own property, she can't have a bank account, and also, unfortunately, it seems like she can't even hold on to things as mementos, because anything that she's basically tried to hold on to, it falls through her grasp at some point. So she basically just has to close her back and her wits about her. And so there's dual storyline where you basically, in one time frame, you're seeing her as she grows up, and then she makes the deal, and then snapshots throughout the years as she learns more about this and gets more used to her curse. And then a current storyline of 2014 where she's in New York City and she ends up meeting someone, Henry, who actually remembers her. And after 300 years, that kind of blows her mind, and what happens then, and how this entity, death, whatever, this dark god, kind of keeps coming back and popping up into her life to taunt her and ask if she's ready to relinquish her soul yet, if she's given up. And it's a very intriguing story. I wasn't fully satisfied with all the interactions with the entity death character, and I wish there was more of a fleshed out romance between her and Henry. It did feel like they had some natural chemistry, but on the other hand, it did kind of feel like, you know, well, of course she's gonna fall for the only guy that can remember her. So I did like it overall. I was very happy that I finally got a chance to read a V.E. Schwab, and I did like it. I gave this book a 4. Next, there's Daughter of the Moon Goddess, and now this book is part of a duology. I've had this book on my shelves for ages, so I was very happy that it was available on Hoopla, so I listened to it in tandem, and I'm sorry if I butcher any of the names. This is basically about the moon goddess Chang'e had a daughter, Xinyan, and her mom, she was mortal, and she was married to a mortal man who did a favor for the Celestial Emperor. The Celestial Emperor gifted the mortal man an elixir of immortality. He didn't have any interest in taking it, but then Chang'e had gotten pregnant with Xinyan, and unfortunately, it was not an easy pregnancy. They thought they might lose the baby, that she might pass as well. Anyone that they asked basically said that it was not going to happen. And so out of pure desperation, Chang'e took the elixir of immortality, and this really upset the Celestial Emperor and the Empress because it wasn't meant for her. And so she was exiled to the moon. And so because she was so nervous after being exiled and missing her husband, she didn't know what to do, so she hid her pregnancy and the resulting child, Xinyan, from the Celestial Kingdom, and didn't tell anyone about her. So she grew up on the moon with her mother and their one attendant, a very solitary life, and very sheltered from a lot of knowledge because her mom didn't really tell her a lot about the world or what was going on or their existence as immortals. So when I believe she's 16 or so, she basically reaches out to silver sparkles that she sees, not realizing that it's her magic and that it will alert the Celestial Kingdom that unknown magic is going on the moon. And so they come to investigate, and her mom, in a panic, is able to dissuade them that anything unusual happened, but she knows that Celestial Kingdom aren't giving up and they'll be around to investigate further real soon. So in a panic, she sends her daughter away, and her daughter ends up in the Celestial Kingdom but has to hide her identity, and it kind of goes on and how she survives, and she ends up befriending the Prince Li Wei, the son of the Emperor and the Empress, and she ends up somehow involved with the army and has a close relationship with a famous general, Wansha. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing, but I liked a lot of it, but it did feel like I wish that they had fleshed out some more of the story. I don't even know what's in the second book, but I almost wish that they had kind of expanded maybe the duology into a trilogy or something, because the time she spends at the palace with Prince Li Wei, it passes by basically off page, and I almost wish that I could have seen more of the development over time and what she learns. And then the time with the army, it also passes by very quickly. It seems to just kind of get little snapshots of battles that are going on, and I just wish some of it was more fleshed out. And then with the general character that I can't pronounce, I didn't really buy into his relationship with Xinyan, and I I don't know. I was a little let down on that front. But then again, I did find the whole idea of the Celestial Kingdom and the different realms and the soldiers and like the four dragons and the different mythology attached to it very fascinating. Now, I don't know how truthful it is with actual Chinese mythology. I don't know if it's a very good representation of it, but I still did find it fascinating and really intriguing. And so I was really happy that I read it, and overall I gave it a 4. Next up is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. Now, this is the first in a trilogy. I've heard a lot of things online about this. A lot of people seem to love it, and I'm not quite sure for a lot of those people if it's a nostalgia thing that they read when they were younger and they love it, but I was very eager to give it a shot. Now, I went in quite blind, not knowing a lot about it, just knowing sisters, Caraval, some sort of magical event, that it was very exclusive, and that was basically it. And oh boy, was this not quite what I was expecting, because even on the front it says, remember, it's only a game. But the stuff that Scarlet goes through in this book, I don't know why anyone would want to go to Caraval. It just seems like if PTSD were an event. I don't know. So I know that things were probably more unusual for her than a casual layperson attending, but it just doesn't seem like my personal idea of fun. This book, I liked it in a lot of ways. It was very creative, the idea, the world, the setup. I fully wanted to root for Scarlet because she's very hopeful in a dire situation. She has an awful father. She loves her sister, Donatella, Tella, very much. And so she just wants the best for her and Tella, and was hoping to marry a nice man and get away from her father. But she's never met the man she's betrothed to. They've shared letters and he seems sweet enough, but her sister is even skeptical about that. And so I'm rooting for her. I want her to win. But I had such a hard time getting really involved in this book because I wasn't drawn to any of the characters. Scarlet made so many stupid decisions in this book and reacted in ways that annoyed me sometimes. And then Julian was kind of with her on a lot of it, and he was sort of the love interest, and he did the stupid thing that I hate where he's cold one minute and then he's super caring and helpful the next, and then he pushes her away again. And I just kind of hate that hot and cold stuff. And then Tella, while she seemed so smart in some instances and you can kind of see through the bullshit, she's still very young, and some of her decisions and the flippant attitude she has a lot of times to the stuff that Scarlet is going through, it just kind of enraged me. And so when I had a hard time connecting with any of the characters, it made the overall thing a little less enjoyable. I'm still eager to continue on with the trilogy and see what I think of the second and third book, because who knows, the journey that the characters go on might make me reconsider my opinion on this book. I might enjoy it better once I see the full character arcs and the journeys that they have to go on as people. But at least for the first book, it wasn't all that I hoped it would be. I gave it a 3.5. Next, I read the first 5 volumes of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, the light novel. So I love this anime. I'm fully invested in the storyline. I watched the most recent season. I can't wait to see more. And so I was very curious because I did poke around online to see kind of the manga of it, but then a lot of people were talking about differences between the light novel and the show and how you get more background information in the light novels. So I was intrigued, so I decided to read the light novel instead of the manga, which I normally would. The basic concept of this is that 37-year-old Satoru Mikami in Japan, he is killed in the street and he is reincarnated in this other world as a slime. And he basically goes on an adventure, and he turns out to be a very special slime in this world. He's unlike any other slime, and he befriends a dragon, and then he goes on and he saves a goblin village, and basically he stumbles his way into becoming the ruler of this city of monsters. And every time he kind of tries to like pass the buck off to other people, he gains more power somehow. And so he has a very unusual attitude. So I like seeing the characters that I know from the anime in the light novels. And there are some differences, but I'm actually surprised by just how faithful the anime is to the light novels. And so just seeing the story that I know, and I know what's coming, but having it more fleshed out was really enjoyable to me. And it's also helpful because there are little spreads like this where you kind of get like the stats broken down to you about certain characters and everything. And so I'm looking forward to reading more of the light novels once I have a chance to pick them up. I'm hoping not to buy them too soon because I don't have the space for them, but I am eager to continue because the 5th light novel basically ended up with, if you're familiar with the show, with him becoming a demon lord, and around season 2, I want to say like episode 12 or something. So that's where volume 5 ends up. So it's kind of at a good point to stop, but also I'm eager to continue with the light novel. So we'll see how long you can hold out and buying more. But overall, I would give these a 4 because some of the parts were a little hard to follow because they do explain more of the skills and the magic system. And sometimes I had to reread parts because even though they were explaining them, I had a hard time following. But at the same point, I still really liked a lot of the characters, and I did like a lot of the extended information I got out of it. So 4, I would say 4.25. And the last book I read in December was The Way of Kings. I started this in November. I only got about 220 pages in, and so it crossed over into December, but I did finish it before the end of the year, and I was very happy. This is quite a daunting book. It is not like the other books that I've read from Sanderson this year. The first Mistborn trilogy and Trust of the Emerald Sea or Warbreaker. This one was definitely using more of my brain power to get through. I did kind of have a hard time finding my footing in this world at first and kind of getting the lay of the land. But I did get sucked into all the characters and the world and what was going on. And I love some of the characters. I hate some of the characters. But thankfully, all of the 3 main characters that I followed in this, I'm intrigued to continue. It's just mostly some of the side characters. I hate Sadeas. If you know, you know. But I'm intrigued. Kaladin, he is my favorite character so far. He has gone through so much for only being like 19 or 20. And I'm just have so many questions at the end of this book. I hesitate to mention anything that has to deal with plot. I will save that more for my wrap-up video for this book individually because it's 1,001 pages in my version and it's just hard to summarize anything in this world. But I really liked it. It didn't give me 5-star feels just because there are so many questions that went unanswered and so many things I don't know in this new world. So while I really enjoyed it, it wasn't satisfying like a 5-star. So I gave it 4.5 because I did really enjoy it. I am really eager to see where things lead, but it wasn't 5-star satisfying to me. So those are the books that I read in December, and here are the stats of the books. I think I read 14 and the page numbers, and I didn't really listen to any just as audiobooks. I listened to a lot more in tandem where I would listen to some while I was doing a chore and then I would pick up the book and I would read them in tandem. But I did set up my library card, and so I have Libby and Hoopla now. So hopefully I will be able to listen to some books that I don't own as well in the coming months. But that's a breakdown, and I am super excited for what's to come in January and in 2025. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.